You can't keep living like this forever, Eleanor, Vanessa said as she stood beside the kitchen island with her arms folded tightly across her cream sweater. Daniel and I need space. And honestly, you're not needed here anymore. The words settled over the dining room like cold dust. For a moment, the only sound was the low hum of the refrigerator and the rain tapping softly against the windows above the sink. I looked down at the bowl of mashed potatoes in my hands and realized my fingers had started trembling. Not violently. Just enough to make the serving spoon rattle against the porcelain. Daniel sat at the far end of the table beneath the warm pendant light Harold had installed himself 12 years ago. My son wouldn't look at me. He kept staring into his glass of iced tea like there was something important floating inside it. That hurt more than Vanessa's words ever could. I'm not saying you have to leave tomorrow, Vanessa continued, her voice smooth and measured, the same tone people use when pretending cruelty is kindness. But this house is too crowded now. We're trying to move forward with our lives. Move forward. I almost smiled at that. Harold had been dead for 8 months, and already his side of the closet was empty. His coffee mug was gone. His workshop in the garage had become storage space for Vanessa's online business inventory. Little by little, I had watched my husband disappear from this house. And now apparently I was disappearing too. I carefully placed the bowl onto the table and sat down without saying a word. The dining room felt smaller tonight. Dimmer somehow. The yellow light cast soft shadows across the walls while steam rose quietly from the roast chicken I'd spent 3 hours preparing. Sunday dinners used to mean laughter in this house. Harold would tell old stories. Daniel would argue about football scores. I would pretend to complain while secretly loving every noisy second of it. But now, every meal felt like a meeting I hadn't been invited to. Vanessa reached for her wine glass. We've actually been talking to a realtor, she said casually. Just exploring options. That finally made Daniel look up. His jaw tightened slightly. Vanessa, he muttered under his breath, but she ignored him. I felt something cold settle deep inside my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Something quieter. The kind of feeling you get when you suddenly understand the room you're sitting in isn't yours anymore. Outside, thunder rolled faintly across the dark Ohio sky. I folded my napkin carefully onto my lap and forced myself to breathe slowly. Then I noticed the envelope sitting near the front door on the hallway table. White. Official looking. Bank of America stamped across the corner in blue letters. Vanessa noticed me staring at it, and for the first time all evening her expression changed. I barely slept that night. The rain continued for hours, soft against the gutters outside my bedroom window, while the old grandfather clock downstairs marked every passing minute like a heartbeat echoing through the house. Around 2 in the morning, I finally gave up pretending I could rest. I slipped on my cardigan and walked quietly into the hallway. The house looked different at night now. Colder. Shadows stretched across the hardwood floors Harold used to polish every spring by hand. Even the air smelled different. Less like coffee and cedarwood. More like scented candles and expensive cleaning products Vanessa ordered online. As I passed the staircase, I noticed the family photographs were gone from the wall. Not all of them. Just the older ones. The pictures of Harold holding Daniel as a little boy. The photo from our 25th anniversary party. The Christmas portrait where all 3 of us wore matching red sweaters because Daniel thought it would be funny. Empty nail holes remained in the drywall like tiny scars. I stood there for a long moment staring at them. Then I heard voices downstairs. Quiet, tense voices. Vanessa and Daniel. I moved closer carefully, stopping near the kitchen entrance where the hallway shadows concealed me. We cannot keep avoiding this, Vanessa whispered sharply. The payment is already late. Daniel rubbed his forehead as he sat at the counter beneath the dim under-cabinet lighting. I told you I would handle it. Handle it with what money? She snapped back. You said your bonus was coming in March. Daniel looked exhausted. Older than 44 somehow. His navy shirt was wrinkled, and there were dark circles beneath his eyes I had not noticed before. Keep your voice down, he muttered. Vanessa lowered her voice, but the tension remained sharp enough to cut through the room. If the bank sends another notice here, she is going to start asking questions. My stomach tightened. Questions about what? I stepped back quietly before the floorboards could betray me and returned upstairs with slow, careful steps. Inside my bedroom, I closed the door and sat on the edge of the bed Harold and I had shared for 38 years. Morning light eventually crept through the curtains in pale gray streaks. By 8 o'clock, I could already hear Vanessa downstairs talking loudly on speakerphone about furniture staging and open house photography. Open house. The words made my chest feel heavy. I walked into the kitchen wearing my soft blue sweater and found Vanessa rearranging decorative bowls across the counter, while Daniel stood silently beside the coffee maker. Sunlight spilled through the windows behind them, warm and golden, almost mocking the tension in the room. Then I noticed something else. The white envelope from last night was gone. For the next few days, the house felt strangely restless. Vanessa kept opening windows even when the air outside was cold enough to sting your lungs. She moved furniture from room to room almost obsessively, replacing family photos with decorative mirrors and pale ceramic vases that looked like they belonged in a hotel lobby instead of a family home. Every corner of the house Harold built with his own hands was slowly being turned into something unrecognizable. On Wednesday afternoon, natural daylight poured through the living room windows while Vanessa stood on a ladder removing the heavy burgundy curtains I had sewn nearly 20 years ago. "These make the room look dated," she said without even glancing at me. I stood near the fireplace clutching a basket of folded laundry against my chest. "Harold liked those curtains," I replied softly. Vanessa sighed dramatically. "Well, Harold is not the one buying the house." The words landed harder than she probably intended. Or maybe exactly as hard as she intended. Daniel walked in just then carrying takeout containers from a sandwich shop downtown. He froze for half a second after hearing her comment, but then continued into the kitchen without saying anything. Again, silence had become his favorite language lately. That evening I noticed something else missing. My mail. I had been expecting a prescription statement from the pharmacy and a birthday card from my sister in Arizona, but the small silver tray near the entryway sat completely empty. "Did the mail already come?" I asked carefully while Vanessa scrolled through her phone beneath the warm glow of the floor lamp. "I do not know," she answered quickly. Too quickly. Later that night, after they had gone upstairs, I stepped outside onto the front porch. The neighborhood was quiet except for distant traffic and the soft rustling of dry leaves moving across the sidewalks. The porch light cast a pale circle across the driveway where Harold used to wash his truck every Saturday morning without fail. I opened the mailbox slowly. Empty. Completely empty. But as I closed the metal door, something caught my eye near the bottom corner. A torn piece of white envelope. Bank of America. My pulse quickened. I pulled the tiny scrap free carefully with my fingertips. There was part of a printed number still visible beside the tear. Final. I stared at that word longer than I should have. Then I heard the front door open behind me. Vanessa stood there in the doorway wearing a silk robe, her blonde hair falling over one shoulder while cool blue television light flickered behind her from the living room. "Looking for something?" she asked quietly. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were not. I turned slowly toward her, keeping my expression calm even though my heart had started pounding hard enough to make my chest ache. Cold night air drifted across the porch between us, carrying the faint smell of rain and damp leaves. Vanessa stepped outside carefully, wrapping her robe tighter around herself while studying me with narrowed eyes. "It is almost midnight," she said. "Most people your age would be asleep by now." I ignored the comment and held up the tiny torn piece of envelope between my fingers. This looked important. For a split second something flashed across her face. Not fear exactly, but panic trying very hard to disguise itself as irritation. She walked down the porch steps toward me and reached for the paper a little too quickly. "It is junk mail," she said. "I already threw it away." I let her take it. Her fingers felt ice cold against mine. Then she forced a smile that never reached her eyes. "You should not stress yourself with financial things, Eleanor. Daniel and I are handling everything." Handling everything. Harold used to say those exact words whenever the furnace broke in the middle of winter or a storm knocked branches onto the roof. But when Harold said them, they sounded safe. Reliable. Vanessa made the words sound like a locked door. I nodded once and quietly returned inside. Upstairs, I closed my bedroom door and sat beside the window overlooking the backyard. The old oak tree still stood near the fence line, its branches swaying gently beneath the porch light. Harold planted that tree the summer Daniel turned 10 years old. I remembered standing beside him in the grass while sweat soaked through his gray t-shirt under the July heat. "This house is our anchor," he told me back then, wiping dirt from his hands. "No matter what happens, this place protects family." I closed my eyes tightly. Harold had spent 38 years paying that mortgage on time every single month. Even during layoffs. Even during cancer treatments. I still remembered him sitting at this very desk late at night with a calculator and stacks of bills spread around him beneath the soft yellow glow of his reading lamp. He protected this house like it was another member of the family. Which meant something was very wrong now. The next morning, sunlight filled the kitchen with bright golden warmth that felt completely disconnected from the tension hanging in the air. Vanessa was unusually cheerful, humming softly while arranging fresh flowers near the sink. Daniel stood beside the refrigerator drinking coffee with, shaking hands. Then the doorbell rang. Sharp. Sudden. Everyone froze. Vanessa quickly looked at Daniel. Daniel looked at the floor. I walked toward the front door before either of them could move. And standing on the porch beneath the clear Ohio morning sky was a man in a navy blazer holding a thick yellow envelope marked certified notice. The man on the porch gave me a polite smile that looked rehearsed from years of delivering bad news. He held the thick yellow envelope carefully against his chest while morning sunlight reflected off the windshield of his parked sedan. "Mrs. Whitmore?" he asked. Before I could answer, Vanessa suddenly appeared beside me so quickly it almost startled me. "We can take that," she said sharply, forcing a bright smile that felt completely disconnected from her voice. The man hesitated. "I need a signature from the property owner." Silence settled over the porch. Not loud silence. The dangerous kind. Daniel stepped forward from behind us, his face pale beneath the clear daylight pouring through the entryway windows. "I will sign it," he muttered. The man glanced down at his clipboard. "Daniel Whitmore?" Daniel nodded once. His hand trembled slightly as he signed the electronic pad. I watched Vanessa the entire time. She kept smoothing her hair behind her ear over and over again, a nervous habit I had only recently started noticing. The moment the man handed over the envelope, she grabbed it almost immediately. Too quickly. "Thank you," she said before closing the door with forced politeness. The deadbolt clicked loudly through the hallway. For a few seconds nobody moved. Vanessa stood frozen near the staircase, clutching the envelope tightly against her sweater, while Daniel stared at the hardwood floor. I could hear the coffee maker still dripping slowly in the kitchen behind us. Drip, drip, drip. Finally I spoke. "Is there something you two want to tell me?" Vanessa let out a small laugh that sounded brittle around the edges. "It is nothing serious." "Nothing serious." People only say that when something is very serious. Daniel rubbed both hands across his face and walked into the kitchen without a word. Vanessa followed him. Quickly. Their voices dropped low almost immediately, but not low enough. "We cannot keep hiding this from her," Daniel whispered harshly. "Do you want her panicking?" Vanessa snapped back. "We just need more time." "Time for what?" I stood alone in the hallway staring at the framed wedding photo hanging beside the staircase. Harold and I looked impossibly young in that picture. His hand rested proudly at my waist while I smiled into the camera with complete trust in the future ahead of us. 38 years together. And suddenly I realized how carefully he had always protected me from stress involving money. Utilities paid early. Mortgage statements organized in neat folders. Insurance renewals marked on the calendar beside the refrigerator. Harold believed stability was another form of love, which meant if something was falling apart financially inside this house now, it had started after he died. My chest tightened slowly as another thought settled into place beside it. Someone had not just hidden information from me. Someone had been intercepting it. That afternoon, the house became unbearably quiet. Vanessa stayed upstairs for hours with the bedroom door closed while Daniel wandered from room to room pretending to organize things that did not need organizing. I sat alone at the kitchen table beside the wide bay window where soft afternoon light stretched across the countertops in pale gold lines. The yellow envelope was gone. So was the forced confidence Vanessa usually carried like perfume. Around 3 o'clock, Daniel finally walked into the kitchen holding a mug of coffee. He clearly had no intention of drinking. He looked exhausted. His tie hung loose around his collar, and his eyes were red from lack of sleep. For several seconds he simply stood there staring out the window toward the backyard. "Mom," he said quietly, "have you ever regretted trusting someone?" The question caught me off guard. I looked down at my folded hands resting on the table Harold bought at an estate sale nearly 30 years ago. "Trust is strange," I answered slowly. "You usually do not realize it is broken until long after the damage is done." Daniel swallowed hard. He sat across from me but still could not fully meet my eyes. Outside, wind moved gently through the old oak tree branches while sunlight flickered across the grass. The world looked peaceful. Too peaceful for the tension tightening inside this house. "Vanessa thought refinancing would help us," he admitted finally. "Interest rates were lower back then. She said we could pay off some debt and renovate the property before selling." Selling. Hearing the word spoken aloud made something inside me go still. "What debt?" I asked calmly. Daniel rubbed his forehead again. "Her business struggled last year. Then there were credit cards, medical bills, some investment losses." He sounded embarrassed saying it, like each sentence physically hurt him. "How much?" His silence answered before he did. My stomach tightened. Daniel stared into his untouched coffee for several long seconds before whispering the number. "Almost $200,000. The kitchen suddenly felt colder despite the sunlight pouring through the windows. Harold spent decades protecting this house from exactly this kind of danger. He skipped vacations during difficult years, worked weekends after the factory downsized, repaired old appliances himself instead of replacing them. Every sacrifice had been made to keep this home safe for family. And now family itself had become the threat. Daniel finally looked at me then, and for the first time in months I saw fear instead of avoidance. "The bank says if we miss another payment..." He stopped speaking. He did not need to finish. I already understood. Foreclosure. The word hung invisibly between us like smoke. Upstairs, I suddenly heard footsteps moving quickly across the hallway floor. Vanessa appeared in the kitchen doorway moments later holding her phone tightly in one hand. Her face had completely lost its color. "Daniel," she said sharply, barely acknowledging me. The bank called again. Vanessa walked into the kitchen like someone bracing for impact. Her blonde hair was pulled back hastily now, and the careful polish she normally carried had completely disappeared beneath panic. She placed the phone face down on the counter with trembling fingers while Daniel slowly stood from his chair. Late afternoon clouds had started covering the sun outside, dimming the kitchen little by little until the room looked washed in cold gray light. "What did they say?" Daniel asked quietly. Vanessa crossed her arms tightly against herself. "They are scheduling a final review next week." Her voice cracked slightly on the word final. Neither of them looked at me. That told me everything. I rose slowly from my chair and walked toward the sink where Harold used to stand every morning making coffee before sunrise. The window above the sink overlooked the backyard fence lined with rose bushes we planted together after Daniel graduated high school. Most of the roses had started wilting now from early autumn cold. I stared at them for a moment before speaking. "How long were you planning to keep this from me?" Silence. Vanessa finally turned toward me, her expression shifting from panic into something defensive. "We were trying to protect you." I almost laughed at that. Protect me? By secretly placing nearly $200,000 of debt against the only home I had left. Daniel rubbed both hands through his hair and sat down heavily again. "Mom, I did not know it got this bad." Vanessa looked at him sharply. "Do not do that." "Do what?" He snapped suddenly, louder than I had heard him speak in months. "Pretend this is normal?" The tension in the room tightened instantly. Vanessa stared at him in disbelief while he stood again, pacing toward the dining room entrance beneath the dim chandelier light. "You kept saying things would improve. You kept refinancing. More loans. More cards. More promises." "I was trying to save us," Vanessa whispered. "No," Daniel replied quietly, exhausted now. "You were trying to maintain a lifestyle we could not afford." The room fell silent again except for the ticking wall clock near the pantry. Tick, tick, tick. I looked at my son standing there beneath the fading evening light, shoulders slumped beneath the weight of mistakes he should have questioned long ago. Then I looked at Vanessa. For the first time since Harold died, she no longer looked powerful to me. She looked frightened. Small somehow. Like someone realizing the floor beneath them was no longer stable. I walked slowly toward the hallway closet near the front door, and reached onto the top shelf where Harold kept old folders and insurance papers. My fingers closed around a thick blue binder covered in dust. Daniel frowned slightly. "Mom, what is that?" I carried the binder back into the kitchen and placed it gently onto the table between them. Inside the front pocket sat a notarized document with Harold's signature across the bottom. Vanessa stared at it as the color drained slowly from her face. Because suddenly, she understood there was something about this house she had never known. The kitchen had gone completely silent by the time Daniel opened the binder. Outside, evening rain had started falling again, soft against the windows, while shadows slowly gathered across the house Harold spent half his life protecting. Daniel carefully pulled out the notarized papers with shaking hands. I watched his eyes move across the first page, then stop. Vanessa stepped closer beside him, her breathing uneven now. "What is that?" she whispered. Daniel looked up slowly, stunned. "Dad transferred the house into a protected family trust 6 years ago." Vanessa blinked rapidly. "What does that mean?" His voice sounded hollow when he answered. "It means the house legally belongs to Mom." The room seemed to collapse inward around her. "No," she said immediately. "That is not possible." But it was. Harold had prepared everything long before his health declined. Every document, every safeguard, every signature. He knew exactly how quickly grief could make someone vulnerable. Daniel kept reading silently while rainwater slid down the dark kitchen windows behind him. Then he froze again. "There is more," he said quietly. I already knew what came next. Harold and I had spent years discussing every possibility after his first heart scare. We promised each other that no matter what happened, neither of us would ever become powerless inside our own home. Daniel swallowed hard before finally reading aloud. "Any refinancing or debt taken against the property without Eleanor Whitmore's direct written authorization is invalid under the trust terms." Vanessa stepped backward so quickly her chair scraped sharply across the floor. "That cannot be right." But her voice no longer carried confidence, only fear. I folded my hands calmly in front of me while the old wall clock continued ticking steadily behind us. Tick, tick, tick. For months I had felt myself shrinking inside this house, quietly erased room by room. First Harold disappeared, then the photographs, then my place at the table. And all along, they thought I was powerless because I stayed silent. Daniel lowered the paper slowly and looked at me with tears gathering in his tired eyes. "Mom, why did you never say anything?" I looked toward the rain outside before answering softly. "Because your father taught me something important." My voice remained calm, steady. The people who truly love you never rush to push you aside the moment you become inconvenient. Vanessa stared at the floor now, unable to meet my eyes anymore. For the first time since Harold died, the silence inside this house belonged to me again. A month later, Vanessa moved into a small apartment downtown, while Daniel stayed behind trying to repair the damage left inside this family. Some things can be fixed slowly. Others leave scars that never fully disappear. But every morning now, I sit beside the same kitchen window with my coffee while sunlight fills the house Harold built for us. Peace feels different when you almost lose it. If you have ever felt invisible inside your own family, or if someone made you feel unwanted after everything you sacrificed for them, I hope you share your story in the comments. And tell me honestly, what would you have done in my place?